Welcome back to Morning Joy, where truth matters. I'm your host, Keith Downey, and I have the absolute pleasure of introducing our guest today. He's the content coordinator for Avila Institute. He also runs an apostolate on social media, Do the Harder Thing. He's also an audiobook narrator, speaker, homesteader, runs a amazing Catholic men's group, and so much more. I feel like I go on, Jordan, but good morning.
Good morning. You're giving me way too much credit than I deserve, but it's a good way to wake up, right?
I forgot to mention, he's also incredibly humble.
I don't know about that one.
No, but thank you so much for joining us. I know you and I kind of tried to figure out what we wanted to talk about this morning, and I felt like, because I came from corporate America, and you had people, I worked with people that were really into personality tests. The organization was into personality tests. That I think talking about Enneagrams would be a good way to share what's appropriate, what's not appropriate for personality tests. So let's talk about Enneagrams. What is an Enneagram, I guess, to start off with?
Yeah, so I'll back up a little bit
Mm-hmm.
just so people know where I'm coming from. I
Yeah.
have done extensive therapy in my personal life, counseling, and various things like that. And at one point, when I wasn't in the church, but I was going to a quote unquote Christian counselor, that's when I was first introduced to the Enneagram. So I do have personal dealings with it, and that's kind of what jumped everything into it. And before people, there are probably people listening who are like, it's bad. It's yes, I know, I'm getting there. But the Enneagram is currently marketed as a personality test. So if you Google Enneagram, that's what it's going to show up next to like the Big Five and the DISC assessment, and I'm trying to Myers-Briggs. I mean, you name it, it'll pop up among those. But what's fascinating is when you dig deep into the research and of how the Enneagram came about, it's not a personality test. And in fact, the guys, there's really a triad of dudes who designed it and kind of built it. They never intended it to be a personality test, which I find fascinating.
Hmm.
So I don't know necessarily. I mean, I know in the history of the Enneagram where it became those personality aspects came in. I know that on the historical timeline. But as far as kind of the world at large picking it up and shoehorning it into a personality test, that I couldn't say. That's
Hmm.
always been an interesting thing for me. So,
Yeah, it's interesting. So yeah, what you mentioned, the timeline of when it kind of got implemented, and so maybe give us a brief, like who created it, why did they create it, and why we should stay away from it as Catholics.
yeah, yeah. So George Gurdjieff is the guy who really created it to begin with. He studied with the Sufis. He was into all sorts of esoteric knowledge, occult knowledge. I mean, I have a fact sheet on this that people can download at some point. I don't think I got the link up in time, but he was into basically anything occult, he was into it, right? So he took this image, the Enneagram image, minus the numbers. The numbers weren't with it originally. And he basically taught that anything you could ever know about the world can be found within this image, right? So there are some people who claim it goes back to like Evagrius of Pontus. That's not true. That's been debunked. Or Raymond Lull. That's also not true. That's been debunked. He had a similar image, but it's not the same thing. So Gurdjieff took this image from essentially Sufism and then added in his own occult nonsense to it. That's basically the easiest way to describe it. The
Mm.
personality stuff came later on from a guy named Claudio Naranjo, if I'm remembering my history. It was either Claudio or Chazo, but I'm 99% that it was Claudio, who came up with the numbers through, and we have this on color video. He came up with the numbers through spirit writing, which is a form of divination. So he's just sitting back and he's letting these spirits come and give him, the information, and he's writing down the numbers. And even then, it was never about personality. It was about what they called egos, which is again esoteric kind of nonsense. So that's like a quick overview, but it goes deep. It goes deep. So
Yeah, quick red flags is having spirits
yeah,
talk, and then also ego, like having
yeah,
the.
right,
So it seems like it might open doors to the demonic from what it sounds like. Would that?
yeah. Yeah, so essentially the argument is because it was founded in demonic from the beginning. I mean, you can read Gurdjieff's writings, Achazo's writings, Naranjo's writings. I believe it was Gurdjieff who actually thought he was speaking. It was either, you know what? Let me just look at the notes real quick.
Yeah.
Before I tell you something wrong. Okay, it was a Chazo. So Gurdjieff was into the occult, had all
Mm,
sorts of occult issues. A Chazo, very similar, same with Narano, all three of them. A Chazo took it one step deeper, and he was high on drugs, mescaline specifically, and believed that he was speaking to an archangel, and the archangel told him everything he needed to know about the Enneagram, what it was going to be, all these sorts of things. And what's I should know that nowhere in Gurdjieff, who's number one, Echazo number two, nowhere in their writings, these guys who founded this, did they ever mention personality at all. It was all
mm,
about esoteric occult knowledge. And I believe it was Echazo who was on we have on video
mm,
who was complaining about the fact that it was becoming more popular and people were using it for personality typing systems. So
mm,
even the guy who created it or had a part of creating it was saying that's not what this is. This was supposed to be a secret club thing that only we knew about and we had the answers and all these different things. This shouldn't have gone public. I
mm.
don't know. Did that answer your question? I
Yeah.
feel like I went a little bit off. Yeah.
No, no, that's very informative. So we have this Enneagram, this personality test, if you will call it that. It's out there. People are subscribing to it. Has the Catholic Church at all itself said something about this at all? Do you know?
Yeah, yeah. So the USCCB drafted a document in response to the Enneagram, and they said, in conclusion, those who are looking for an aid for personal and psychological development should be aware that the Enneagram teaching lacks a scientific foundation for its assertion, and that the Enneagram is of questionable value as a scientific tool for the understanding of human psychology. Then it kind of goes on deeper about the spiritual aspects and says, the church warns against the supposed numerological, it's still early here, numerological theory involved in the modern version of the Enneagram, saying for a Christian to subscribe to such numerology, as the Enneagram does, that would be to fall into a form of superstition. But I mean, my favorite quote is from JP2, who warned that the Enneagram is in conflict with all that is essentially Christian.
Wow. I
Yeah.
didn't even know that the church had. I was just curious if the Catholic Church has said something about it. So yeah, if the Catholic Church is saying don't do it, then we obviously need to to take that in advice. Question on if maybe we know people that are close to us, family, friends that are open about using this. What is there? I mean, you mentioned you're going to have a document be posted.
Yeah.
What resource? Where could we find that? That resource that you're planning on posting. But is there anything else we should look for to help kind of share information on?
Yeah, so my apologies for not having the link ready for you, but we're going
Oh,
to have it on spiritualdirection.com. I'll have it on my site, dotheharderthing.com. I'll put it on the Instagram as well. I want to make it as easy, like
mm,
totally free. Just take it, give it to people who need it because this is something that needs to be combated. It's gaining in popularity. But you can if you search, like Father Mitch Pacwa is one of the best ones. What's fascinating about him is that he learned the Enneagram from some of these guys. I don't remember which one specifically. He's written about this.
mm,
And he claims that he taught it to Richard Rohr. And so now Father Mitch, who, as awesome as he recognized the error of what was going on, and he's
mm,
written some of the most in-depth articles against it.
mm,
So coming from a guy who taught it to now who's fighting against it, that's some of the best text out there. But there's other great, like Pope Leo the 13th has put stuff out. I don't know if that's necessarily public things, but
mm.
there might be a copy floating out there somewhere. There's nothing on it that lay people don't need to know. It basically repeats much of what I'm already saying. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, thank you for that. Now, you also mentioned, obviously Father Mitch Pacwa taught it. I'm sure. I mean, I've heard stories too of parishes endorsing enneagrams, and so
yeah.
if we happen to be at a parish that is pushing that, what can we do as a layperson to stop that?
Yeah, so number one, prayer and fasting. I mean, we all know this, right? Prayer and fasting. We recommend generally that if you're gonna bring something to your priest's attention, something that you think needs to be rectified, this seems like a really long time, but it's as a general rule, at least here, we say pray and fast for a month.
Hmm.
And that way you can make sure that you're as humble as possible. If it's something that you're really discerning whether or not you need to bring it to their attention, but you're doing it in a proper way. Always truth and charity, of course. That was something I struggled with for years.
Hmm.
Keith knows me well. So truth and charity, that sort of a thing. And then take something like this, a document like this that lays it all out. I mean, this document that I created hits it in two specific ways. The first half of the document treats it scientifically, where we have quotes from the leading psychological, if that's the correct word, I'm not sure,
Mm,
personality researchers out there, and they've all, or many of them have said, this, I would never recommend this test for any reason
mm,
whatsoever. So non-spiritual institutions who are saying, don't use this. This is not what you think it
mm,
is. And then on the backside, I have kind of the historical context of who these guys were, what they believed in, and then what the church says.
mm,
So things like that, where you're not just going to your priest and saying, hey, listen, this is bad. It's like, here's something that you can look into and research on
mm.
your own to kind of come to that decision.
That's great advice. And we even talked about, or a little bit earlier, Debbie Georgiani and Adam Bly talked about, even Adam said, do the harder thing at one point, I think a couple of times. And then he also said that we also talked about prayer and fasting and the power behind that.
Yeah.
So it's funny how those two intertwined. Are there any personality tests that are safe?
So I did a great show with Dr. Mary Ruth Hackett, who gave me much of the information on the psychological side. And she was telling me that the Big Five has a lot, 40 years, I think, of research behind it.
Okay. That's good to know. So we'll stay with that and get that Enneagram stuff out of the way. But so we can follow you on Instagram on Do the Harder Thing. Also, that you can jump into Avila Institute. You said spiritualdirection.com as well.
Yep, that's it.
Okay, perfect. So we can follow it. We'll keep an eye open for all of the information about Enneagrams. I guess one last thing. Are you coming up to the after show clubhouse, Jordan?
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. This will be great. So if you don't know what the after show clubhouse is, it's kind of when you take the show, it's a little bit more relaxed. We let our hair down, so to speak, and then we just talk with you. We can talk with you and interact. It's on YouTube and Facebook. It's streamed, so it's easy for you. If maybe you're not going to listen to Mass after the show, it's perfect. If you are going to listen to Mass, please pray for us. But you can find us on GRN Online on YouTube or Facebook and stream from there. So that is our cue to say goodbye. If you are moving on for the rest of your day, we will pray for you. Pray for us. And hey, we'll see you tomorrow, February 16th, Friday. But until then, God bless and make it a joyful day. We'll see you soon.
This has been Morning Joy, where truth matters, hosted by Keith Downey. Take some joy with you today. Visit grnonline.com/joy to listen again, share a segment, or answer the question of the day. That's grnonline.com/joy.